Like and subscribe or this koala will get you wet too. Has a person ever found out you have talked about them on this subreddit before? What is the story? Yet. I wrote this huge long story about this girl I hated growing up on a subreddit. I have no idea how they found me in the thousands of replies on the subreddit, and out of all of them, mine, and she somehow pinned it down to me and found me on FB. She messaged me on Facebook, I responded, then blocked her, then unblocked her and wrote another message. Haven't heard back from her at all. I've been on the other side, as in I found out someone I knew was talking about me on here and I chose not to even bring it up because that would risk me potentially giving up my Reddit anonymity. So if anyone found out I talked about them here and they were anything like me, I don't know if they'd even tell me. Some clinic made me wait 2 hours for a blood test, then lost the blood test, and never told me. I knew because 6 months later my family doctor told me he never received it. What's a story you always wanted to tell on this sub, but nobody ever asked the right question? My wife teaches kindergarten more or less. My son attends kindergarten at the same school. I brought them a tire, the size of a monster truck tire, to play on in their yard. Don't ask why, weird idea, but they loved it. So we cleaned it up, scrubbed it, and I drilled holes in it so the water would drain when it rained. Few days ago it's just me and my son. I ask how his day was and he says, blah blah fun, blah blah ate lunch, blah blah fun, blah blah Xavier got his finger stuck in the tire, blah blah fun. So I ask him to back up, and he just repeats that his friend Xavier got his finger stuck in the tire in one of the holes we drilled for draining the water. I told him that sounded sad, and he said, yes it was and it rained. So I thought, poor kid. So I said, wow, poor kid, did you get him a raincoat? And he said, no daddy, we didn't want to get near him cause he pooped himself. So I'm thinking, really poor kid. So I said, wow, really poor kid, did the teachers help him? And he said something like, he was out there a long time, then it devolved and I really couldn't get any more information out of him. So I felt guilty about this kid, cause I did drill the holes in the tire, but eventually it slips my mind. Wife gets home, we have dinner, etc., but I forgot about it till I'm talking to her way after the kids have gone to bed. Then suddenly it pops into my head, so I say to her, so, our son told me one of the kids got his finger stuck in the tire Toda, and she just bursts out laughing. I sat there dumbfounded. Then she explained to me Xavier isn't one of the kids, he's a teaching assistant who is supposed to take care of the delayed kid in the class, except his kid didn't show up, so he just played with the other students all day. Apparently this 25-year-old guy was sitting on the tire and thought it was a smart idea to try to jam his finger into one of the holes, which makes it crazy. Thinking a little kid could get their finger in almost made sense. But for an adult finger it's almost a miracle he could get it in without breaking a bone. Anyways, apparently he got his finger in there and couldn't pull it out, and they couldn't pick up or move the tire, and the guy was stuck out there for hours, and yes, it did rain, and yes, he really did crap himself. My wife said all the kids kept watching him out the window as it rained. Eventually they called emergency and she said she was gone at lunch when they arrived, but Xavier was gone when she got back and the guy didn't come back to school that week. We still don't know how they got his finger out. What was the scariest thing you have seen heard? When I was younger, I don't remember how old, but early elementary school, I remember that I just had a strong gut feeling to wake up and sit up, so I did. I looked out my bedroom door and one of my mom's friends was in my doorway. He took a step or two and immediately lost balance and tried to grab my dresser to not fall. He ended up dragging my dresser with him and it destroyed my room. I went into airplane mode and just got out of my room and went to my mom. My mom heard the crash and found him in my room and beat the shit out of him. He then ran away without shoes. I told her the story and we found out 3-5 days later that he overdosed. We don't know if it was on purpose or not, but he was gone. It still haunts me to this day. When I was 6 or 7 years old I used to spend a lot of time home alone in our house. It was a big one, full of creepy places. I remember that there was this door in the yard that connected to a studio that my family used to record some music. It was this big door, like a really heavy thing. One afternoon my dog, a black Labrador called Fuser, started barking at the door, which was open at that time cause I wasn't able to close it on my own because its weight. He was very aggressive, like if something dangerous was behind the door. He was always a friendly dog that wouldn't hurt anyone, but something had set him off. The door closed by itself after a few seconds, making a lot of noise. It was an afternoon without wind, so it didn't make any sense. The door was too heavy anyway. It was scary. I locked myself in my room after that. There were some weird noises outside but didn't have the guts to go and check what was happening. Posted this to another thread, so I'll just make it shorter. Me and my brother were playing Pokemon that night when the old, dysfunctional radio suddenly turned on, playing static. I started crying and my brother was shivering. Parents came in to check. Brought to parents' bedroom. Dad explained next day that it was from his grandpa, and was probably haunted. I got scared of static for 5 years that day. What is the creepiest glitch you've experienced in real life? Was taking the train home one afternoon and an old man was sitting a row ahead of me. He turned around and asked for directions to the hospital, and I told him which stop to get off at. Eventually, his stop arrives and he gets up to leave, but before he exits he turned and said, "Thank you, I'll see you later." I said, "Yeah, no problem," and again he said, "I'll see you later," and he looked me right in the eye. I said, "Sure, see ya," and he got off the train and hobbled away with his cane. Thought it was a little weird he was adamant about seeing me around, but whatever. Freaky thing is, when I got off the train and to the bus station, about 5 minutes after boarding my bus I hear a voice that sounds like the old man. I looked out the bus window. I had a dream about a coworker. She loved dogs and would always ask me to share pictures of my GSD and Labrador whenever we'd talk at work. In the dream she was on a couch crying. My Labrador is a very emotional, connected dog. She goes to anyone she thinks is sad, which is exactly what she did in the dream. My coworker looked at me and said, "Thank you for sharing her, I feel better about all of this now." I found out at work the next day that my coworker had tripped at the top of her stairs and died that night. The dream still freaks me out when I think about it. It was so vivid and clear. When my mom called to tell me that my grandpa died, I thought she said Papa died and Papa is the nickname for my dad. I was crying uncontrollably, and when I finally figured out it was Grandpa I was too embarrassed to admit that I thought it was my dad. I called him later and told him and he just laughed. Anyway, fast forward 3 weeks and my dad dies too. Part of me thinks mishearing her was the universe preparing me to lose him. It was weird because it was like I lost him twice and I'm still kind of waiting for someone to tell me it was all a mistake and it was actually someone else. Edit. I feel kind of bad because I've barely thought about Grandpa since my dad died. My grandma has it the worst because she lost a husband and a son in the same month. What was your "I'm freaking dead when I get home" moment? I skipped school to hang out with my boyfriend. He convinced me that I sounded just like my mom on the phone, so I should call into school and pose as my mom saying I was sick. So I did. The office lady took the info and I thought that's that. 10 minutes later I get a call at my boyfriend's house from my mom. Office lady knew something was off and called my mom at work. Mom knew where I'd be and called my stepdad to go get me. He was already down the block by the time she called me at his house. I still remember the icy chill of her voice when I got on the phone. It was a dark day. Well, it was my friend's birthday and we all were at his house. Our friend, who was 17, we were fish, he was a junior, picked all 5 of us up at midnight and we drove around. We ended up in my friend's neighborhood around 2:30 a.m. and the speed limit was like 35 and our driver decides 85 is close enough to the limit. We see lights and all shit ourselves. The cop interrogated our driver and questioned why we were out past curfew. Anyway, we got a warning and we all crapped ourselves. The cop is walking to his car to leave when one of our friends recognized the cop as his neighbor and yelled, "Officer, it's me, dumb retard, your neighbor." We all just looked at him. He claims to this day he was the one to get us out of being put into juvie. Anyway, we get home to the lights on in the kitchen and the bedrooms. We knew we were freaking dead. I've got a dad who said stuff like that to me. And guess what? Even when you make something of yourself, they never acknowledge it. Nothing is ever good enough for people who say shit like that. I got a job at a very prestigious tech company, one of the ones you hear about daily, using my useless English degree, no less. And my dad still made fun of me and told people I was working on finding myself. The point is, it doesn't matter what your parents think is amounting to something, it just matters what standards you set for yourself. Hell, you may have already amounted to something by your own standards and have been overlooking it because it doesn't meet your parents' definition. But even if you haven't, keep working at the things you dream of having and be proud when you get them. I believe in you.